Hello viewers of the Darkness Prevails channel. Today we invite you to 76, a collection of stories. Beyond the hallowed halls and ancient archives, a web of secrets allegedly festers. 76 terrifying secrets the Vatican is hiding from unsolved mysteries peels back the layers of one of the world's most powerful institutions to explore shocking claims, suppressed histories, and unexplained phenomena. Are you ready to question everything you thought you knew? Hey guys, tonight we descend. We're not just peeking behind a curtain. We're tunneling deep into the bedrock of centuries, into a place where shadows cling to secrets like ivy to ancient walls. Imagine towering shelves disappearing into the gloom, the air thick with the scent of decaying parchment and whispered confessions. You feel the chill, don't you? The kind that has nothing to do with the temperature. It's the chill of knowledge too vast, too potent for any single soul to bear. You probably won't survive this with your cozy assumptions intact. Some truths, once glimpsed, have a habit of rearranging your mental furniture for good. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop it in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking now, though you can't quite recall how you got here. The air is cool, unnaturally still, and carries the scent of old paper, a dry, almost sweet aroma mixed with the faintest hint of beeswax and something else, something metallic perhaps? Your footsteps echo softly on what feels like cold stone, even though you can't see the floor clearly. Ahead, an archway looms, carved from the same pale stone as the unseen floor, and beyond it, rows upon rows of shelves stretch into an oppressive darkness. This, my friend, is the threshold of the Vatican Apostolic Archives, once more famously, and perhaps more accurately, known as the Vatican Secret Archives. Imagine a library, but then multiply that image by a factor that strains your imagination. We're talking about a rumored 85 kilometers. That's about 53 miles of shelving. 53 miles. Picture yourself trying to walk that distance. It's like completing a marathon, then turning around and doing most of it again. Only this time, every step is flanked by towering stacks of human history bound and waiting. You definitely need to pack a lunch and maybe a very good GPS, or at least leave a trail of breadcrumbs, hoping the Vatican mice aren't too hungry. The sheer volume is overwhelming, a silent testament to 2 millennia of human endeavor, faith, folly, and power. For centuries, these archives were the exclusive domain of the Pope and a handful of trusted scholars. The very name, Secret Archives, conjured images of forbidden knowledge, of truths too dangerous for the world to know. Pope Francis officially changed the name in 2019 to the Vatican Apostolic Archives. The official line is that the Latin word secretum, from which secret derives, didn't originally mean secretive in the modern sense, but rather private or personal, referring to the Pope's private papers. A subtle rebranding, perhaps, to make it all sound a little less, well, secret. But you can't help but wonder if a name change truly alters the nature of what lies within those endless corridors. Does a wolf become a poodle if you just call it Fluffy? You drift past shelf after shelf, the spines of ancient tomes looking like a condensed, sleeping city. What untold stories do they hold? Letters from kings and emperors, papal bulls that shaped nations, transcripts of inquisitions, financial ledgers detailing the wealth of ages. There are records of Galileo Galilei's trial, his forced recantation of the earth revolving around the sun, a stark reminder of when science clashed with dogma. Historians have pored over these, but access, even now, is a carefully managed affair. You don't just walk in and ask for the conspiracy section. There are layers of clearance, and much of the material, especially post-1939, remains largely off-limits to protect diplomatic and personal sensitivities. Or so they say. But it's the rumored contents that truly ignite the imagination, that send shivers down your spine in this dim, echoing space. Whispers persist of documents deliberately suppressed, of inconvenient truths locked away from prying eyes. Are there exhaustive lists of every priest credibly accused of misconduct, tucked away from public scrutiny? Detailed accounts of the Vatican's actions or inactions during World War II? Some even suggest that hidden deep within this labyrinth are texts that could rewrite religious history itself, perhaps lost gospels or first-hand accounts that challenge the very foundations of accepted doctrine. Historians still argue whether the truly sensitive materials, those that might cast the Church in an unfavorable light regarding its political machinations or internal crises, are ever made available, even to accredited scholars. The cataloging system itself is said to be a beast, with some older sections relying on handwritten indices that are as much a puzzle as the documents they list. You run a finger along a shelf, the dust thick enough to write your name in. You'd probably need an allergy pill the size of a communion wafer to spend any real time in some of these older sections. Think of the sheer weight of information. Correspondence from Michelangelo, perhaps, complaining about Pope Julius II's micromanagement of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Or maybe something more esoteric. One quirky, verified find, for instance, is a letter written on silk from the 13th century Mongol leader Hulagu Khan to Pope Innocent IV, essentially demanding the Pope's submission. It's a tangible link to a world so different, a power dynamic almost unimaginable today, preserved in these cool, dark vaults. But what else like that exists, uncatalogued, or perhaps catalogued under a heading so obscure no one would ever think to look? The silence here is profound, broken only by the whisper of your own breath and the imaginary rustle of parchment ghosts. It's the kind of silence that presses in on you, heavy with the weight of unread words, unspoken secrets. You can almost feel the presence of the countless individuals whose lives are documented here, their hopes, fears, triumphs, and sins all filed away. It's not just where the Pope might keep his spare encyclicals, but a repository of decisions that have shaped empires, condemned heretics, and guided the spiritual lives of billions. And as you wander deeper, the feeling grows that some of these secrets are not merely historical curiosities, but living things, still capable of reaching out from the past to touch the present. You imagine a single misfiled document, perhaps overlooked for centuries, that could unravel everything. The air grows colder, or perhaps it's just a thought. What if the most terrifying secrets aren't even written down, but are simply implied by the vast, echoing absences on these 53 miles of shelves? What if the greatest secrets are the ones they don't have to write down because everyone in power just knows? The darkness ahead seems to thicken, beckoning you further into its dusty embrace. You feel a strange pull, a subtle vibration in the air, as if the very atoms around you are humming with a forgotten frequency. The endless shelves of the apostolic archives seem to recede, replaced by a more confined, almost claustrophobic space. It's less a library now, and more like a workshop, or perhaps a hidden laboratory. The scent of old paper is still there, but it's mingled with something sharper: ozone, maybe, or the faint metallic tang of charged particles. In the center of this imagined room, bathed in a dim, flickering light, you perceive the outline of a peculiar contraption. It looks like a television screen, but older, more archaic, encased in wood and brass with an array of unfamiliar dials and lenses. This, legend whispers, is the chronovisor. The story of the chronovisor is one of those tales that sits precariously on the knife edge between fantastical fiction and tantalizing possibility, a perfect Vatican enigma. The chief proponent of its existence was Father Pellegrino Ornetti, a Benedictine monk, respected musicologist and physicist, who claimed in the 1960s and 70s that he, along with a team of 12 other renowned scientists, including, he alleged, Enrico Fermi and Wernher von Braun, though they were conveniently deceased by the time he went public, had developed this device. You can just picture Father Ornetti, perhaps a little like a slightly more devout Doc Brown from Back to the Future, hunched over his schematics, muttering about tachyons and etheric energies. According to Ernetti, the chronovisor didn't predict the future, nor did it allow for physical travel through time. Instead, it supposedly operated on the principle that all sights and sounds humans create become a form of energy, an etheric record imprinted on the environment, echoing through time. The chronovisor, he claimed, could tune into these residual energies, these ghosts of past events, and reconstruct them as visual and auditory experiences on its screen. Think of it as a cosmic DVR, capable of replaying history's greatest hits or its most private moments. He even alleged it was built with bits of antennae made from mysterious alloys that could pick up these lingering images and sounds. You imagine the hushed excitement, the clandestine meetings as Ernetti and his supposed team first switched on their creation. What did they see? Ernetti claimed they had witnessed Christ's crucifixion, a lost play by the Roman poet Quintus Ennius called Vestis, and Napoleon Bonaparte addressing his troops. He even said they'd seen a Roman market in Trajan's Forum. He even produced a supposed photograph of Christ on the cross, purportedly taken from the chronovisor's screen. This image, however, was later largely discredited when an almost identical but mirrored image of a wood carving by the artist Cullet Valero was discovered. Coincidence? Or a rather clumsy attempt at providing proof? Father Ernetti later seemed to retract some of his claims before his death in 1994, though some say he was pressured to do so by the Vatican itself. The Vatican, for its part, has never officially acknowledged the existence of such a device. Of course not. Can you imagine the implications? If the Church possessed a window into the past, a way to verify or disprove foundational historical and religious events, the power would be immeasurable. They could, in theory, settle every theological debate, confirm every miracle, or expose every historical fraud. The mainstream historical fact is that many technologies we now take for granted were once considered fantastical. Think of early radio or even television itself. To someone in the 19th century, the idea of transmitting moving pictures through the air would have seemed like witchcraft. So while the chronovisor sounds like pure science fiction, the history of invention is littered with scoffed-at ideas that eventually became reality. But the secrecy, the potential for misuse is staggering. What if, instead of just observing, the device could somehow be used to alter perceptions of the past? Or what if the images weren't objective recordings but were somehow filtered or manipulated by the device itself or by its operators? Historians still argue whether Ernetti was a brilliant, misunderstood visionary, a well-meaning fantasist, or even part of a deliberate disinformation campaign. Some speculate that perhaps a rudimentary version of such a device was created, but proved too unreliable, too dangerous, or revealed things the Vatican would rather remain unseen, and was therefore dismantled and its existence denied. You can almost hear the worried whispers in Vatican corridors. What if it shows us something we don't want to see about our past? Imagine the ethical dilemmas. Who decides what historical events are viewed? Who controls the narrative formed from these glimpses? A quirky tidbit associated with the chronovisor legend is that Father Ernetti claimed the device was eventually dismantled by us because it was too dangerous, capable of seeing anyone's past, anywhere, anytime. He said it could lead to the most fearsome dictatorship the world has ever seen, a noble sacrifice of knowledge for the sake of privacy and freedom, or a convenient excuse for why no one can find this miraculous machine anymore. It's like saying you built a working lightsaber, but then threw it in a volcano because it was, a bit pointy. You reach out, your fingers almost brushing the cool glass of the imagined screen. For a moment, you think you see a flicker, a shifting of shadows within its depths, a Roman legion marching, the silent scream of a heretic at the stake, the sorrowful face Ernetti described. But it's gone as quickly as it came, leaving only your reflection staring back, a question in your eyes. If such a device did exist, locked away in some sub-basement of Vatican City, it would represent not just a technological marvel, but the ultimate secret keeper. A silent, all-seeing witness to history, its potential to confirm or confound, to enlighten or to terrify, held in check by the few who might know of its existence. The air around you seems to crackle faintly again, the lingering charge of an impossible invention, or perhaps just the static of your own imagination, fueled by the Vatican's penchant for closely guarded secrets. The idea of it, the sheer audacity, is enough to make the shadows in this place seem deeper, more watchful than before. And the thought that such a thing could be real, even if it isn't, makes the ground beneath your feet feel a little less solid. The phantom hum of the chronovisor fades, and the air in your imagined Vatican sanctum grows heavier, almost perfumed, but not with incense. It's an older, more earthy scent, mixed with the faintest trace of something metallic, like old blood, and perhaps a hint of iron gall ink from centuries of papal decrees. You find yourself standing before a vast, ornate throne, not the current papal chair, but one that feels older, imbued with a different kind of power, a different kind of story. And as you gaze at it, a most unsettling figure begins to coalesce, not a stern-faced pontiff in regal robes, but a woman. Her face is intelligent, her eyes hold a hint of defiance, and she wears the papal tiara. This is the spectral presence of Pope Joan, a figure officially denied, yet persistently haunting the fringes of Vatican history. The legend of Pope Joan is one of the most enduring and scandalous tales whispered about the papacy. The story, in its most common form, tells of a brilliant and learned woman, often named Agnes or Gilberta or Yuda, who lived in the 9th century, though some accounts place her in the 11th. Disguised as a man, supposedly to pursue an education otherwise denied to her, she rose through the church hierarchy, eventually being elected pope, taking the name John VIII. Her true sex, the story goes, was only revealed when she unexpectedly gave birth during a papal procession, perhaps between the Colosseum and St. Clement's Basilica. The shocked populace, feeling utterly betrayed, supposedly then subjected her to a rather grisly end. It's the kind of story that makes you wonder if the papal tailor ever thought, Pope John seems to be putting on a bit of weight around the middle, and only around the middle. For centuries, Pope Joan was widely believed to be a real historical figure. Her story appeared in numerous chronicles and manuscripts, including the influential Chronicon Pontificum et Imperatorum by Martin of Opava in the 13th century. Her statue was said to have been included among those of other popes in Siena Cathedral, and some guides to Rome even pointed out the spot where she supposedly gave birth. Mainstream historical fact, the narrative of Pope Joan was largely accepted as true by many within the Church itself for several hundred years, from the 13th to the 17th century. It wasn't until the Reformation, when Protestant critics used the story to mock the papacy, that Catholic historians began to rigorously debunk it. The Vatican today vehemently denies that Pope Joan ever existed, dismissing the tale as anti-papal propaganda, a myth born from satire or a misunderstanding of certain historical events or artifacts. They point to the lack of contemporary 9th century evidence, the unbroken line of male popes in official records, and the fact that the story only seems to gain traction centuries after she supposedly reigned. Historians still argue whether Pope Joan was a complete fabrication, a symbolic figure representing anxieties about female power in the Church, or perhaps a conflation of other, less sensational stories. Could there have been a woman who achieved a position of significant, albeit hidden, influence within the Vatican, whose story became exaggerated over time into the legend of a female pope? Yet, the legend persists, fueled by intriguing, if often apocryphal, details. One such quirky tidbit is the existence of a peculiar papal chair known as the sedia stercoraria, or dung chair. This was a type of porphyry throne with a keyhole-shaped opening in the seat. Legend has it that after the Pope Joan scandal, newly elected popes were required to sit on this chair so that a junior deacon could reach underneath and verify their masculinity. Testiculos habet et bene pondats. He has testicles, and they hang well, the deacon would supposedly proclaim, to the relief of all assembled. While some scholars argue these chairs were merely repurposed Roman birthing stools or imperial commodes, their ceremonial use and the stories surrounding them certainly added fuel to the Pope Joan fire. Imagine the job interview for that particular diaconal duty. So, tell me about your 5-year plan, and are you good with, well, checking things? You try to picture this scene, the grandeur of a papal election, the cardinals in their scarlet, the hushed anticipation in St. Peter's. And then, unknowingly, they elect a woman. What courage, or perhaps reckless ambition, would it have taken for her to maintain such a deception day after day, in the very heart of male ecclesiastical power? You can almost feel the crushing weight of her secret, the constant fear of discovery. Every theological debate, every diplomatic meeting, every blessing given, all under the shadow of that one monumental lie. The official denial is firm, unwavering. But what if the records were altered? What if, in the aftermath of such a colossal scandal, a concerted effort was made to expunge her from history, to rewrite the papal lists, to destroy any contemporary accounts? The Vatican archives, remember, are vast. If you wanted to erase someone from history, that would be the place to start, or rather, to end their paper trail. The absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence, especially when dealing with an institution so adept at managing its own narrative for millennia. You look at the phantom figure on the throne again. Is she a fiction, a convenient scapegoat, a Protestant taunt? Or is she a ghost of a different sort, the ghost of suppressed truth, a symbol of the Church's complex and often troubled relationship with women in power? The story of Pope Joan taps into a deep-seated fascination with the idea of the ultimate insider exposing the ultimate secret. Whether she was real or not, her legend serves as a potent reminder that even the most sacred institutions can have their foundations shaken by what they choose to hide or what history chooses to whisper about them. The scent of old secrets seems to cling to the air, a reminder that not all phantoms are the supernatural kind. Some are born from the ink of disputed chronicles and the deliberate silences of official records. The thought of a woman, brilliant and bold, occupying the throne of St. Peter, only to be violently erased. It's a narrative that, true or not, speaks volumes about the anxieties of power and gender that have echoed for centuries within those hallowed and perhaps haunted Vatican walls. The spectral image of Pope Joan dissolves, and the air around you grows heavy, not with the dust of archives or the scent of old secrets, but with a palpable sense of foreboding. It's as if a storm is gathering, not in the sky above Rome, but in the very fabric of time itself. You feel an inexplicable chill, a prickling on your skin, as your focus shifts to a small, unassuming chapel bathed in candlelight. 3 children kneel in prayer, their faces etched with an awe that borders on terror. You're witnessing the prelude to one of the Vatican's most enduring and debated mysteries, the 3 secrets of Fatima. The story begins in 1917, in the rural Portuguese town of Fatima. 3 young shepherd children, Lucia dos Santos, and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, reported experiencing apparitions of the Virgin Mary. These apparitions delivered messages, prophecies, and warnings, collectively known as the secrets of Fatima. The first 2 secrets were revealed relatively early. The first was a terrifying vision of hell, described with vivid medieval imagery of a great sea of fire populated by demons and shrieking souls. Imagine being a child and seeing that. You probably wouldn't be asking for a bedtime story about fluffy bunnies anytime soon. The second secret predicted the end of World War I but warned of an even worse war to come, World War II, if people did not cease offending God, and also spoke of the rise and fall of communism in Russia and the eventual triumph of the Immaculate Heart. These first 2 secrets, while dramatic, were largely in line with existing Catholic eschatology and Marian devotional themes. But it was the third secret that captured the world's imagination, primarily because of the intense secrecy surrounding it. Lucia, the eldest and sole surviving seer, Francisco and Jacinta, having died young in the Spanish flu pandemic, wrote down the third secret in 1944 at the behest of the Bishop of Leiria. She sealed it in an envelope, instructing that it not be opened until 1960 or upon her death, whichever came first, because she said, "It will seem clearer then." This instruction itself became a source of immense speculation. Why 1960? What was so significant about that year? You can almost feel the weight of that sealed envelope, sitting in the Vatican archives for decades. Popes came and went. Pope John XCI reportedly read it in 1959, a year early if you're keeping score, and according to accounts, decided against revealing it, stating, "This prophecy does not relate to my time." Pope Paul VI also read it and chose to keep it sealed. This papal reluctance only fanned the flames of speculation. What could be so terrible, so devastating, that successive popes deemed the world unready to hear it? Theories abounded: nuclear apocalypse, widespread apostasy within the church itself, even a papal assassination. The suspense was almost unbearable for devout followers and curious onlookers alike. Some people dedicated their entire lives to trying to uncover or interpret what the third secret might contain. It was the ultimate religious cliffhanger. Finally, in the year 2000, during the Jubilee year, Pope John Paul II authorized the publication of the third secret. The official text described a vision of a bishop dressed in white, interpreted as a pope, struggling through a ruined city filled with corpses, and then being killed by soldiers firing bullets and arrows. Other bishops, priests, and religious figures were also shown being killed. The Vatican's official interpretation, presented by then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, linked this vision to the persecution of Christians in the 20th century and specifically to the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II himself. Mainstream historical fact: Pope John Paul II credited Our Lady of Fatima with saving his life after he was shot on May 13th, the anniversary of the first Fatima apparition. He believed a mother's hand guided the bullet's path. However, for many, this official revelation and interpretation felt anticlimactic. Underwhelming, even. After decades of build-up of popes deeming it too sensitive for public consumption, was this it? A symbolic representation of past persecutions? Many Fatimists, those deeply invested in the Fatima prophecies, cried foul. They believed the true third secret was far more terrifying and had not been fully revealed. They pointed to Lucia's earlier comment that it would be clearer in 1960, arguing that the assassination attempt on John Paul II happened in 1981, making the 1960 date seem arbitrary if that was the secret's core meaning. Historians still argue whether the complete text of the third secret was indeed released in 2000, or if parts of it, perhaps more damning or controversial, were deliberately withheld by the Vatican. Some claim there are two texts, or a missing addendum to the one released. A quirky tidbit that fuels this skepticism is the enduring testimony of individuals like Father Malachi Martin, a former Jesuit and Vatican insider and controversial figure in his own right, who hinted before his death in 1999 that the real third secret involved widespread apostasy within the Church, a crisis of faith reaching the very top of the hierarchy. Imagine the implications if the Virgin Mary had warned of a spiritual rot from within, rather than just external attacks. That's a secret the Vatican might understandably be hesitant to broadcast. It's like getting a divine performance review that says, "The call is coming from inside the house." You picture Lucia, an elderly nun by then, her face a mask of inscrutability. Did she agree with the Vatican's interpretation? Was she satisfied with what was released? Or was she bound by obedience to remain silent about any discrepancies? The controversy continues to simmer, a testament to the power of prophecy and the deep suspicion that can arise when an institution known for its guardedness claims to reveal all. The Fatima secrets, particularly the third, tapped into our deepest anxieties about the future, about divine judgment, and about the trustworthiness of even the most revered institutions. The vision of a pope being gunned down is certainly harrowing, but for some, the true terror lies in the unconfirmed whispers of a spiritual catastrophe, a final betrayal that might still be locked away in that metaphorical envelope, its fiery content still capable of scorching the faithful, should it ever truly see the light of day. The candlelight in your imagined chapel seems to flicker violently, as if a draft from some unseen open vault has just swept through. The candlelight of Fatima's chapel dims, and the scent of impending doom is replaced by something far more worldly, yet no less unsettling. The cold, crisp aroma of old money, mingled with the faint, metallic tang of ink from countless ledgers and the sterile smell of reinforced vault doors. You find yourself in a sleek, modern office, a stark contrast to the ancient archives and candlelit chapels. Polished marble gleams under subtle lighting. But the silence here is different, not the silence of reverence or antiquity, but the tight-lipped silence of high finance and closely guarded accounts. You're now peering into the notoriously opaque world of the Institute for Works of Religion, or, more commonly, and often ominously, known as the Vatican Bank. Founded in 1942 by Pope Pius XII, the IOR's stated purpose is to provide for the custody and administration of movable and immovable property transferred or entrusted to it by physical or juridical persons and destined for works of religion or charity. A noble mission on paper. It's meant to manage funds for religious orders, Catholic charities, Vatican employees, and Holy See departments. However, its history is shadowed by accusations of money laundering, political intrigue, and involvement in some of Italy's darkest financial scandals. You don't typically associate your local piggy bank with international espionage, but this is no ordinary piggy bank. This one has the Pope on its board, metaphorically speaking. Unlike a typical bank, the IR is not open to the general public. It serves a very specific clientele, and its operations have historically been shrouded in a level of secrecy that would make a Swiss banker blush. For decades, it operated with minimal external oversight, leading to a perception, and sometimes the reality, of it being a financial Wild West within the Vatican's sovereign walls. You can almost picture shadowy figures in trench coats making discreet deposits, their briefcases clinking with more than just rosary beads. One of the most infamous episodes in the Vatican Bank's history is its connection to the collapse of Banco Ambrosiano in 1982, one of Italy's largest private banks. The chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, Roberto Calvi, known as God's banker due to his close ties with the Vatican, was found hanging from Blackfriars Bridge in London under deeply suspicious circumstances, his pockets filled with bricks and cash. It had all the hallmarks of a mafia hit. Just prior to his death, Banco Ambrosiano had collapsed with over $1 billion in debt, much of it linked to shell companies apparently controlled by the IOR. The Vatican, while denying any legal responsibility for the collapse, eventually paid out hundreds of millions of dollars to creditors as a goodwill gesture. A very expensive oops our bad, but not legally our bad moment. Mainstream historical fact, Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, the American prelate who headed the IOR from 1971 to 1989, was a central figure in these scandals. He was indicted by Italian authorities in connection with the Banco Ambrosiano affair, but avoided prosecution due to Vatican diplomatic immunity. He famously quipped, "You can't run the church on Hail Marys." True, perhaps, but running it on questionably sourced offshore funds probably wasn't in the original job description for St. Peter either. Historians still argue whether the Vatican Bank, under Marcinkus and others, was a witting accomplice in criminal enterprises, a naively exploited institution, or simply a victim of its own opaque and unaccountable structure. Were they actively laundering money for the mafia or political slush funds, or were they just really, really bad at due diligence? The truth likely lies in a murky combination of factors, but the lack of transparency has allowed the darkest suspicions to fester. Then there's the quirky and frankly chilling tidbit about the WikiLeaks scandals. In 2012 and again in 2015 to 2016, confidential documents were leaked from within the Vatican, exposing internal power struggles, alleged corruption, and mismanagement of finances, including at the IOR. These leaks suggested that despite reform efforts, old habits died hard. There were accounts of lavish spending by cardinals, suspect investments, and continued difficulties in bringing the IOR fully into compliance with international financial transparency standards. Pope Francis has made cleaning up Vatican finances, and specifically reforming the IOR, a major priority of his papacy. He's appointed new leadership, brought in external auditors, and closed thousands of suspicious or dormant accounts. It's like he decided to finally open the Vatican's financial closet and found it stuffed with more skeletons than a medieval catacomb. You imagine the hushed conversations in Vatican corridors, the resistance from entrenched interests, as reformers try to shine a light into these shadowy corners. Money is, they say, is power, and IOR has historically been a significant, if controversial, instrument of Vatican influence on the world stage. Beyond the headline-grabbing scandals, think of the smaller, everyday questions. How are investment decisions made? Are they ethically screened? Where do the profits truly go? For an institution dedicated to spiritual matters, the sheer opacity of its financial dealings has often been a source of deep discomfort and suspicion for both believers and non-believers alike. The sleek, modern office around you suddenly feels colder. The polished surfaces reflect distorted images, hinting at the hidden complexities and potential moral compromises that can come with managing vast sums of money, even when it's ostensibly for God's work. The Vatican Bank represents a unique intersection of faith, finance, and power, a place where the sacred and the profane have often uncomfortably mingled. While Pope Francis has undoubtedly made strides, the legacy of secrecy and scandal is a long one, and the allure of untraceable funds in a sovereign microstate is a temptation that perhaps never fully disappears. The quiet hum of computers and the rustle of unseen paperwork seem to whisper of balance sheets and bottom lines, a stark reminder that even in the heart of the Holy See, the shadow of mammon can loom large. The terrifying secret here isn't a demon or a hidden prophecy, but the more mundane, yet perhaps more corrosive, possibility of greed and corruption tarnishing even the most sacred of missions. The cold gleam of the Vatican Bank's offices fades, and the air grows heavy with a different kind of chill, the icy dread of a mystery that has haunted the cobbled streets just outside St. Peter's Square for decades. You find yourself standing near a nondescript Vatican city gate on a summer afternoon, the sun bright, the sounds of ordinary life, chatter, distant traffic, filling the air. But a shadow falls, a sudden, inexplicable silence, as you focus on a young girl with a flute case, her face full of youthful promise. This is Emanuela Orlandi, and her vanishing act is one of the Vatican's most deeply unsettling and persistently unsolved mysteries. On June 22, 1983, Emanuela Orlandi, the 15-year-old daughter of a Vatican employee, disappeared after attending a music lesson in Rome. She was a citizen of Vatican City, living with her family within its walls. After her lesson, she called home, telling her sister about a job offer she'd received from a man representing Avon Cosmetics. Then she vanished. Just like that. One moment a typical teenager, the next a ghost, swallowed by the ancient city, leaving behind a heartbroken family and a mystery that would entangle popes, secret services, international terrorists, and organized crime. You can almost feel the sudden, sickening lurch her family must have experienced, the ordinary day turning into an unending nightmare. In the days and weeks that followed Emanuela's disappearance, a bewildering series of claims and demands emerged. Strange phone calls were made to her family and to news agencies. Some callers claimed to be holding Emanuela, linking her release to the release of Mehmet Ali Agca, the Turkish gunman who had attempted to assassinate Pope John Paul II 2 years earlier. This immediately catapulted her disappearance into the realm of international intrigue. Was she a pawn in a high-stakes game between the Vatican and shadowy political forces? The Turkish connection became a dominant theory for a time, suggesting that groups connected to Agca, perhaps Bulgarian or Soviet intelligence agencies, as Agca himself sometimes claimed, had kidnapped Emanuela to pressure the Vatican. It's like a spy thriller, but with a terrified teenage girl at its heart. The Vatican, under Pope John Paul II, made numerous public appeals for Emanuela's release. The Pope himself spoke of her disappearance multiple times, expressing his closeness to the Orlandi family. Mainstream historical fact: the case of Emanuela Orlandi remains an open investigation in Italy, and the Vatican has also launched its own inquiries over the years, most recently in 2023, spurred by renewed public interest and family pressure. Despite these efforts, no definitive answers have ever been found. No body has ever been recovered. Over the decades, the theories surrounding Emanuela's fate have multiplied, each more disturbing than the last. Was she taken by someone within the Vatican itself, perhaps to silence her or her father, who worked for the prefecture of the papal household? Rumors, never substantiated, hinted at a Vatican sex scandal, with Emanuela as a tragic victim. Then there's the connection to the Banda della Magliana, a powerful Roman criminal organization. Enrico de Pitis, a notorious boss of the gang, was once bizarrely buried in the Basilica di San Apollinare, a church directly connected to the music school Emanuela attended. His tomb was exhumed in 2012 in a fruitless search for clues, a macabre scene that only deepened the mystery. Why was a known crime lord given such a prestigious burial place? Did he know something about Emanuela? Did the Vatican know something about him? Historians still argue whether the Vatican has been fully transparent in its handling of the Orlandi case. Have they shared all relevant information with Italian investigators? Or have they, for reasons of state, diplomacy, or to protect internal secrets, held back crucial details? The Orlandi family has certainly expressed frustration over the years, feeling that the Vatican has not done enough, that it knows more than it admits. You can imagine their anguish, living in the shadow of the institution that was supposed to be their protector, yet feeling stonewalled in their search for truth. A particularly quirky and unsettling tidbit involves a mysterious phone call received by a host of a missing persons TV show in Italy in 2005. An anonymous caller stated that the secret to Emanuela's disappearance lay in who was buried in the crypt of the Basilica di San Apollinare, and to check the favor that De Pitis had done for Cardinal Ugo Poletti, who had authorized De Pitis's burial in the church. This call reignited speculation about the Magliana gang's involvement and potential Vatican complicity or knowledge. It's the kind of cryptic clue that belongs in a Dan Brown novel, yet it's a real piece of this tragic puzzle. It's like someone leaving a breadcrumb, leading directly into a viper's nest, with the Vatican uncomfortably close by. You see Emanuela's youthful face frozen in time in the countless posters that papered Rome, her smile a haunting counterpoint to the sinister theories that swirl around her. Her disappearance is a raw, open wound for the city of Rome and for the Vatican. It's a constant, nagging reminder that beneath the veneer of sanctity and sovereignty, dark currents can flow. The Vatican city-state is the smallest country in the world, a walled enclave. How can someone simply vanish from its orbit, with a mystery enduring for so long, if not for powerful forces ensuring silence? The silence itself becomes a terrifying secret. Is it a silence of ignorance or a silence of complicity? The sun still shines on the Vatican gates in your mind's eye, but now it casts longer, darker shadows, and the ordinary sounds of the city seem to carry a whisper of Emanuela's name, a question mark that hangs eternally over the Holy See. The thought that a child of the Vatican could be so utterly lost and the truth so deeply buried is a chilling indictment of secrets kept too well for too long. The chilling enigma of Emanuela Orlandi's disappearance fades, but the sense of unease lingers, shifting now from a specific crime to a broader, more pervasive question of authenticity and faith. You find yourself in a dimly lit sacristy, or perhaps a private chapel, deep within the Vatican. The air is heavy with the scent of old incense, beeswax, and something else, dry, almost dusty aroma that speaks of great age. Before you, displayed on velvet cushions within ornate, jeweled containers known as reliquaries, are various objects: a sliver of dark wood, a piece of cloth, a fragment of bone. These are sacred relics, tangible connections to the saints, to Christ himself, objects of veneration for millions. But as you gaze upon them, a question as old as the practice of relic veneration itself forms in your mind. Are they holy, or are they hoaxes? The veneration of relics has been a significant part of Christian practice for centuries, particularly within the Catholic and Orthodox traditions. Mainstream historical fact: the Second Council of Nicaea in 787 AD officially sanctioned the veneration of relics, affirming that honor paid to these sacred objects passes to the holy figures they represent. This gave theological underpinning to a practice that was already widespread, stemming from the early Christian reverence for the remains of martyrs. Relics were seen as conduits of divine power, capable of inspiring faith, effecting miracles, and offering protection. Churches and cathedrals vied to possess important relics, as they drew pilgrims, prestige, and, not insignificantly, donations. You can imagine a medieval bishop thinking, "We really need a finger bone of St. Stephen to boost next quarter's visitor numbers." The Vatican itself is a vast repository of relics. St. Peter's Basilica, the very heart of Catholicism, is built over what is traditionally held to be the tomb of St. Peter, the first pope. Within its walls and in its treasuries are countless other relics, from fragments of the true cross to the lance of Longinus, the spear said to have pierced Christ's side, to the veil of Veronica, reputed to bear the miraculous imprint of Christ's face. These are not just historical artifacts. For many believers, they are sacred touchstones, powerful reminders of their faith's foundations. However, the history of relics is also rife with a booming and often unscrupulous trade. During the Middle Ages, the demand for relics was so high that it led to widespread fraud, theft, and even the dismemberment of saints' bodies to create more relics to sell or distribute. Entire industries sprang up to produce fake relics for credulous pilgrims. Geoffrey Chaucer, in his Canterbury Tales, memorably satirized this with his pardoner, who carried a collection of bogus relics, including a pillowcase he claimed was Our Lady's veil, to trick the faithful out of their money. It was the medieval equivalent of selling counterfeit designer handbags, only with eternal salvation supposedly at stake. You look closer at the fragment of bone before you. Is it truly from a first-century saint, or is it, perhaps, the femur of a particularly unfortunate medieval peasant, dug up and passed off as something holy? Historians still argue about the authenticity of many famous relics. While the Church has procedures for verifying relics, these often rely on tradition, historical documentation, which can itself be forged or unreliable, and sometimes, more recently, scientific analysis. But even scientific testing can be inconclusive or controversial. Carbon dating, for instance, can determine the age of organic material, but it can't prove its association with a specific holy person. Consider the Shroud of Turin, believed by many to be the burial cloth of Jesus. While not officially a Vatican relic, it's owned by the Holy See, but kept in Turin. It's perhaps the most famous and intensely studied religious artifact in the world. Carbon dating in 1988 suggested it was a medieval forgery. However, proponents of its authenticity have challenged these findings, citing potential contamination or flawed methodology. The debate rages on, a perfect example of the tension between faith, science, and the desire for tangible proof of the divine. A quirky tidbit in the world of relics is the sheer proliferation of some items. Theologian John Calvin famously quipped that if all the alleged fragments of the true cross were gathered together, they would fill a large ship. Similarly, there were reputed to be enough nails from the crucifixion to shoe every horse in a Roman legion, and more than a few heads of John the Baptist floating around various European churches. It's like a divine franchise where every location claims to have the original recipe. While this is often cited to debunk relic veneration entirely, some apologists argue that many such relics were brandia, objects that had merely touched a primary relic and were thus considered sanctified by association, not necessarily the original item itself. A subtle distinction, perhaps lost on many a medieval pilgrim. The Vatican's stance on its own primary relics is one of cautious reverence, acknowledging the historical traditions while generally being circumspect about making absolute claims of authenticity that could be scientifically disproven. But the very existence of these objects within its holiest sites lends them an immense spiritual weight. The question of their genuineness touches upon the very nature of faith. Does it matter if the wood is truly from the cross? If belief in its sacredness inspires piety and good works? Or is faith built on a potential deception inherently flawed? As you contemplate these ancient fragments, you sense the immense hope and devotion they have inspired over centuries. Millions have knelt before them, prayed for intercession, sought comfort and healing. But you also feel the shadow of doubt, the whispers of opportunism and deceit that have always accompanied the relic trade. The Vatican, as the custodian of so many of these powerful symbols, sits at the heart of this tension. The terrifying secret here isn't necessarily that all relics are fake, but that the line between sacred object and historical artifact, between genuine devotion and cynical exploitation, can be incredibly, sometimes invisibly, thin. And the true provenance of many of its most revered treasures might be a secret the Vatican itself either doesn't fully know or prefers to keep locked away with the saints' bones, leaving faith to fill in the gaps. The quiet reverence of the reliquary chamber dissolves, replaced by an altogether more visceral and unsettling atmosphere. The air grows cold, not with the chill of ancient stone, but with a palpable sense of malevolence. You feel a prickling at the back of your neck, an instinctive urge to look over your shoulder. You're now in a sparse, unadorned room, perhaps somewhere within the Vatican's jurisdiction, or a diocesan office mirroring its practices. There's a crucifix on the wall, a Bible on a simple table, and the low murmur of Latin prayers. You are confronting the enduring and eerie reality of exorcism, a ritual the Vatican officially endorses and for which it trains designated priests. While the dramatic, head-spinning, pea-soup-spewing depictions of exorcism in popular culture, "Thank You, the Exorcist," have largely defined the public imagination, the actual Catholic rite of exorcism is a formal, albeit rare, liturgical practice. Mainstream historical fact: the Catechism of the Catholic Church explicitly states that exorcism is performed when the Church asks publicly and authoritatively in the name of Jesus Christ that a person or object be protected against the power of the evil one and withdrawn from his dominion. The Church distinguishes between minor exorcisms, like those performed during baptism, and major exorcisms, which are directed at the expulsion of demons from a possessed individual and can only be performed by a priest with the express permission of his bishop. The Vatican periodically offers courses and conferences for priests on the ministry of exorcism, emphasizing the need for careful discernment. Before a major exorcism is even considered, the Church requires that the person undergo thorough medical and psychological evaluations to rule out mental or physical illness. This is a crucial step, a nod to modern science, though critics might argue it's a rather convenient way to filter out cases that don't fit the demonic possession narrative. You can imagine the checklist. Did the patient float? No. Do they speak ancient Aramaic? Only on Tuesdays. Okay, probably just needs more fiber. Despite these safeguards, the practice itself remains deeply unsettling for many. The idea that a malevolent, supernatural entity can invade and control a human being is a primal fear, one that modern sensibilities often struggle to reconcile with a rational worldview. Yet, for the Church, the existence of Satan and demonic influence is a theological reality. You picture a priest, perhaps elderly and world-weary, or young and newly ordained, confronting what he believes to be a genuine case of demonic possession. The intensity of that spiritual battle, the prayers, the holy water, the crucifix held aloft against shrieks and contortions. It's a scene that feels ripped from another age, yet it continues in the 21st century. Historians still argue whether reported cases of demonic possession are genuine supernatural phenomena, manifestations of severe psychological distress, culturally conditioned hysteria, or even deliberate fraud. The symptoms often described, speaking in unknown languages, glossolalia, exhibiting superhuman strength, revulsion towards sacred objects, knowledge of hidden things, can sometimes be explained by psychology or trickery. However, exorcists and those who believe in possession maintain that there are cases that defy conventional explanation. One quirky and rather chilling tidbit from the world of exorcism is the phenomenon of demonic transference, where the evil spirit, upon being cast out of one person, allegedly attempts to enter another nearby, sometimes even the exorcist himself. This adds a layer of personal danger and spiritual warfare to the rite. It's not just a matter of saying the right prayers. It's a direct confrontation with a hostile intelligence. Imagine the spiritual fortitude required, the constant vigilance against not just the demon and the possessed, but the potential for it to lash out and seek a new host. Anyone else feel a bit tingly? Probably isn't what you want to hear from the priest mid-ritual. The Vatican's chief exorcist for many years, Father Gabriele Amorth, who passed away in 2016, was a prolific writer and outspoken figure who claimed to have performed tens of thousands of exorcisms. He often lamented that not enough priests were trained as exorcists, and that some bishops were overly skeptical. He spoke of demons revealing their names, engaging in dialogues, and manifesting in terrifying ways. His accounts, while perhaps sensationalized by some, brought the practice of exorcism into the modern spotlight, challenging the notion that it was merely a relic of a superstitious past. You can sense the immense psychological and spiritual burden placed upon those involved in an exorcism, the possessed individual, their distraught family, and the priest tasked with confronting the alleged evil. What if they're wrong? What if the demon is actually a treatable mental illness being exacerbated by the ritual? Or conversely, what if it is a genuine demonic entity and the ritual fails? The potential for harm, both spiritual and psychological, is significant. The Vatican's continued endorsement of exorcism in an age of science and skepticism is, for many, a terrifying secret in itself, not a hidden document, but a public affirmation of a belief system that acknowledges active, malevolent spiritual forces at work in the world. It suggests that the battle between good and evil is not just a metaphor, but a literal, ongoing struggle that can manifest in the most personal and horrifying ways. The dim room around you seems to grow darker, the shadows deeper. The whispered Latin prayers take on a more urgent, desperate tone. The thought that, according to the Vatican, the veil between our world and a realm of hostile spirits is thin enough for some to slip through is a profoundly unsettling one, a secret that speaks not of ancient conspiracies, but of present-day fears and unseen battles waged in the quiet corners of faith. It's a reminder that for the Church, the spiritual world is not just a matter of belief, but a reality with which it must sometimes do battle. The oppressive atmosphere of the exorcism chamber slowly dissipates, and the air thins, becoming crisp and cold, as if you've suddenly been transported to a high-altitude observatory or perhaps a very, very secret sub-basement. The scent of old incense is gone, replaced by a faint, almost sterile smell, like ozone or ionized air. Your gaze is drawn upwards, not to a crucifix, but to an imagined star-dusted sky, or perhaps a radar screen, flickering with unidentified blips. You're now probing one of the more out there, yet surprisingly persistent rumors surrounding the Vatican. Its alleged secret knowledge concerning extraterrestrial life in UFOs. It might seem like a giant leap from demonic possession to alien encounters, but for some theorists, it's all part of the same spectrum of hidden knowledge the Vatican supposedly guards. The core idea is that the Catholic Church, with its millennia of history, its global network of observers, priests, missionaries, scholars, and its own astronomical observatory, couldn't possibly be ignorant of something as potentially world-altering as the existence of intelligent extraterrestrial life or unexplained aerial phenomena. If ETs had been phoning or visiting Earth, surely the Vatican would have picked up the call, or at least seen the long-distance charges. The Vatican Observatory, Specola Vaticana, is one of the oldest astronomical research institutions in the world. Mainstream historical fact: its roots go back to the late 16th century. It was formally refounded by Pope Leo XIII in 1891 to show that the Church supported good science. Today, it operates telescopes in both Italy at Castel Gandolfo, the Pope's summer residence, and Arizona, the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, or VATT, on Mount Graham. Its scientists are respected astronomers who conduct genuine research. So, the Church is literally looking at the stars. The question is, what exactly are they seeing, and what are they not telling us? The rumors really took flight in the mid-20th century, coinciding with the rise of the modern UFO phenomenon. Whispers began that the Vatican had its own X-Files, a secret archive dedicated to encounters with alien craft and beings. Some even suggested that the Vatican had recovered crashed UFOs or was in communication with extraterrestrials. Imagine a Swiss guard, instead of his usual halberd, armed with a laser rifle, standing guard over a hangar containing a captured flying saucer. Nothing to see here, just the Pope's new Pope Mobile prototype. Very advanced. While there's no credible evidence to support these more extreme claims, the Vatican itself has made some intriguing and surprisingly open-minded statements about the possibility of alien life in recent years. Several high-ranking astronomers at the Vatican Observatory have publicly stated that believing in extraterrestrial life does not contradict Catholic faith. Father Jose Gabriel Funes, a former director of the Vatican Observatory, famously said in 2008 that he could imagine aliens and that they could even be our brothers, and that ruling out their existence would be like putting limits on God's creative freedom. Brother Guy Consolmagno, the current director and MIT graduate, no less, has also written and spoken extensively on the topic, suggesting that baptizing an alien, should one request it, wouldn't be out of the question. This openness has, paradoxically, fueled further speculation. Is it a genuine theological exploration or a subtle preparation for a future disclosure? Historians still argue, or perhaps, more accurately, ufologists and theologians debate, how the discovery of intelligent extraterrestrial life would impact world religions, particularly Catholicism. Would it shatter traditional understandings of humanity's place in the universe, of salvation history? Or could it be integrated, as Consolmagno and Funes suggest? The Vatican's willingness to engage with the question is, for some, a sign that they know more than they're letting on. A quirky tidbit that often gets woven into these theories is the alleged involvement of the Vatican in UFO studies during the Cold War, sometimes linked to obscure intelligence operations or supposed secret societies within the Church. Some fringe theories claim that certain Marian apparitions or angelic visitations described in historical religious texts were actually encounters with extraterrestrials, misinterpreted through the lens of the prevailing culture. So, was that Angel Gabriel, or was it Zorp from Planet Xylar with a very shiny suit? You try to picture a secret meeting in some deep Vatican vault. Cardinals, scientists, and perhaps a stern-faced intelligence officer reviewing grainy photos or strange metallic fragments. The implications are staggering. If the Vatican possesses undeniable proof of alien visitation, why keep it secret? To prevent mass panic? To protect religious dogma? Or perhaps the aliens themselves have requested secrecy? The possibilities are as vast as space itself. The official stance is one of scientific inquiry and theological openness. But the mystique of the Vatican, its reputation for long-held secrets, makes it a prime candidate for such grand conspiracy theories. The idea that an institution so ancient, so globally influential, could be sitting on the biggest secret in human history, that we are not alone, is undeniably compelling. It transforms the Vatican from a purely spiritual entity into a player in a cosmic drama. The faint hum you perceived earlier now sounds less like earthly machinery and more like the distant thrum of an unidentified craft, hovering just beyond the reach of conventional understanding. Whether it's sober scientific inquiry or a repository of cosmic secrets, the Vatican's gaze towards the heavens keeps us wondering what truly lies hidden, not just in its archives, but perhaps in the stars themselves. And the thought that the answer to "Are we alone?" might be locked away in a filing cabinet next to, say, a papal bull from the 12th century is both absurd and strangely thrilling. The imagined hum of alien spacecraft fades, and you feel yourself descending, not from the stars, but deep into the earth, beneath the very foundations of the Vatican. The air grows cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet stone, ancient earth, and the faint, lingering aroma of incense mixed with something older, something primal. You are now in a shadowy labyrinth of the Vatican necropolis, specifically the layers beneath St. Peter's Basilica, where centuries of history are literally stacked upon each other. And here, under the heart of Christendom, you encounter an unexpected and fascinating secret: the remains of a pagan temple dedicated to the god Mithras. The Mithraic mysteries were a Roman mystery cult centered on the god Mithras, which flourished from the 1st to the 4th centuries AD. It was particularly popular among Roman soldiers, merchants, and administrators, a men-only club, if you will, with secret rituals, communal meals, and a complex 7-grade initiation system. You can almost picture them, these ancient Romans, gathered in their underground temples or Mithraea, which were designed to resemble the cave where Mithras was said to have slain a sacred bull, an act known as the Tauroctony, which was the central icon of the cult. It was a religion of loyalty, order, and cosmic struggle, a serious competitor to early Christianity for the hearts and minds of the Roman Empire. Mainstream historical fact: excavations under St. Peter's Basilica, which began in the 1940s in a search for St. Peter's tomb, unexpectedly revealed an extensive pre-Christian Roman necropolis, a veritable city of the dead, with streets, mausoleums, and tombs dating from the 1st to the 4th centuries. It was upon this pagan burial ground that the original Constantinian basilica was built in the 4th century. And within this necropolis, or very close to it, evidence of Mithraic worship has been found, not just under St. Peter's, but in other locations in Rome, sometimes startlingly close to early Christian sites. The discovery of pagan worship sites directly beneath or in immediate proximity to major Christian churches is a powerful reminder of the complex religious landscape of ancient Rome. It wasn't a simple case of Christianity arriving and paganism immediately vanishing. There was a period of overlap, coexistence, and sometimes intense rivalry. Imagine early Christians gathering for their services, perhaps hearing the faint chanting or the sound of ritual from a nearby Mithraic temple. It must have been a constant reminder of the spiritual battles being waged. The presence of a Mithraeum, or strong Mithraic influences, so close to the traditional site of St. Peter's martyrdom and burial is particularly intriguing. Some scholars suggest that the choice of Vatican Hill for Constantine's Grand Basilica was not just about Peter's tomb, but also a deliberate act of religious superimposition, building a triumphant Christian monument directly over a place with pagan, and perhaps specifically Mithraic associations to signify Christianity's victory. Your bull-slaying god is cool and all, Constantine might have thought, but our fisherman apostle is founding an empire here. Historians still argue about the extent of Mithraism's influence and its relationship with early Christianity. There are some superficial similarities: communal meals, ideas of salvation, a struggle between good and evil, the birth of Mithras from a rock often associated with December 25th, later adopted for Christmas. Some 19th and early 20th century scholars even controversially proposed that Christianity borrowed heavily from Mithraism. However, most contemporary scholars emphasize the significant theological differences and argue that similarities are often exaggerated or coincidental developments within a shared Roman cultural environment. A quirky tidbit is that many Mithria were deliberately desecrated or destroyed as Christianity gained dominance in the 4th and 5th centuries. Finding remnants of these temples, sometimes with their altars smashed or their statues defaced, provides a tangible link to this period of religious conflict. Yet, the fact that evidence of their existence is preserved, literally entombed beneath the Vatican, is a strange irony. It's like finding your arch-rival's secret clubhouse buried in your own basement. You can almost feel the layers of history pressing down on you in this subterranean space. The faint scent of sacrificial smoke from centuries past seems to mingle with the damp earth. The silence is profound, broken only by the drip of water, echoing through chambers where Roman soldiers once shared their sacred meals and swore their oaths to a god of light and cosmic order. What secrets did they share in these underground sanctuaries? What were their hopes, their fears, their understanding of the divine? The existence of these pagan remnants doesn't necessarily imply a Vatican secret in the sense of a deliberate, ongoing concealment of an inconvenient truth today. The archaeological findings are well documented and accessible to scholars. However, it's a secret of the earth itself, a secret that the very ground upon which the Vatican stands holds a history far more diverse and complex than the monolithic narrative of Christian triumph might suggest. It's a reminder that the foundations of even the most powerful religious institutions are often built upon the shifting sands of previous cultures and beliefs. The pagan gods may have been officially vanquished, but their echoes linger in the stones, subterranean whisper beneath the thundering pronouncements from above. The idea that the spiritual energy of these ancient cults still resonates in the bedrock beneath St. Peter's adds another layer of mystique and perhaps a touch of unease to the Vatican's already complex spiritual geography. It's a tangible link to a time when the future of faith in the Roman world was still very much up for grabs. The damp chill of the Mithraeum fades, and you find yourself in a grand yet somber hall. The air is thick with an almost theatrical tension, mingled with the unmistakable, though thankfully imagined, odor of decay. Before you, propped up on a throne, is a grotesque sight, a corpse dressed in full papal vestments. Its decaying flesh, sallow and sunken, contrasts macabrely with the rich silks and gold embroidery. This is the cadaver synod of 897 AD. One of the most bizarre and horrifying episodes in papal history, a terrifying secret not because it's hidden, but because it reveals the brutal depths to which human ambition and vengeance could sink, even within the supposedly sacred heart of the Church. The Synodus Horrenda, as it's chillingly known in Latin, involved Pope Stephen VI putting the corpse of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, on trial. Yes, you heard that right. A dead pope exhumed 9 months after his death, was dressed in his papal robes, seated on a throne, and subjected to a formal ecclesiastical trial. You can just imagine the scene. The accusers pointing fingers at the silent, decaying defendant, a young deacon, pale and trembling, appointed to speak on Formosus's behalf. Talk about a tough gig. Your Holiness, my client pleads. Well, he's not pleading much of anything right now, being dead and all. Pope Formosus had been a controversial figure. His papacy, 891 to 896 AD, was marked by political maneuvering and shifting alliances in the chaotic world of late 9th century Italy, where various factions vied for control of the papacy and the remnants of Charlemagne's empire. Stephen VI, his successor after a brief intervening papacy of Boniface VI, who lasted only 15 days, belonged to a rival faction bitterly opposed to Formosus and his policies, particularly his crowning of Arnulf of Carinthia as Holy Roman Emperor. The trial was essentially a political vendetta, a way for Stephen and his supporters to posthumously invalidate Formosus's acts and papacy. The charges against Formosus were numerous: that he had unlawfully coveted and seized the papacy, that he had violated canon law by transferring from one bishopric, Porto, to another, Rome, and that he had committed perjury. The corpse, naturally offered no defense. The outcome was a foregone conclusion. Formosus was found guilty. Mainstream historical fact. The cadaver synod resulted in Pope Formosus's papal acts and ordinations being annulled. This had immediate and chaotic consequences, as priests and bishops ordained by Formosus were suddenly deemed to be improperly ordained, throwing the church in Rome into turmoil. But the macabre spectacle didn't end with a verdict. The papal vestments were stripped from Formosus's corpse. The 3 fingers of his right hand, the fingers he had used for blessings and ordinations, were hacked off. His body was then initially buried in a common grave, only to be exhumed again. This poor guy really couldn't catch a break, even in death, and thrown into the Tiber River. It's a level of vindictiveness that's hard to comprehend. Fishermen later reportedly retrieved the body, and popular opinion, horrified by Stephen VI's actions, began to turn. Historians still argue about the precise political motivations and the full cast of characters behind the cadaver synod. Was Stephen VI merely a pawn of powerful political factions, like the Spolitan family who had been slighted by Formosus? Or was he a genuinely unstable and vengeful individual? The records from this period are often fragmentary and biased, making definitive judgments difficult. What is clear is that it was a moment of profound crisis and degradation for the papacy. A quirky, though grim, tidbit is that Pope Stephen VI himself didn't enjoy his victory for long. The public outrage over the cadaver synod was so intense that he was overthrown, imprisoned, and strangled to death later that same year, 897 AD. It seems that putting a dead man on trial can have serious repercussions for your own job security, and indeed your continued existence. It's like cosmic karma delivered with brutal efficiency. You like exhuming popes? Let's see how you like this noose. The image of that silent, decaying pope on trial is a stark reminder of the Saeculum Obscurum, the dark age of the papacy in the 9th and 10th centuries, a period marked by corruption, violence, and the domination of the papal office by ambitious Roman aristocratic families. It's a far cry from the serene, divinely guided institution the Church often projects. This wasn't a secret hidden in an archive. It was a public horror show, a terrifying display of power politics played out on the very body of a deceased pontiff. The terror of this secret lies not in its concealment, but in its raw, unvarnished display of human depravity within a sacred office. It shatters any illusion of the papacy as an unbroken line of saintly figures. It reveals a time when the See of Peter was a prize to be fought over with a ferocity that disregarded even the basic decencies owed to the dead. While the Church has long since condemned cadaver synod and rehabilitated Formosus, his acts were later reinstated. The event remains a permanent, grisly stain on its history. It's a chilling example of how vengeance can fester, how political power can corrupt absolutely, and how even the holiest of institutions can be dragged into the deepest, darkest pits of human cruelty. The grand hall around you seems to echo with the silent screams of Formosus's desecrated corpse and the triumphant, yet ultimately doomed, shouts of his accusers, a terrifying testament to a time when the Vatican was truly a house of horrors. The ghoulish spectacle of the cadaver synod fades, but the scent of intrigue and old power struggles lingers in the air, now tinged with the imagined clang of swords and the faint, metallic smell of hoarded gold. You find yourself in a vaulted chamber, not unlike those you've already explored, but this one feels different, more martial, perhaps, with a lingering aura of disciplined piety mixed with worldly wealth. Your thoughts turn to a legendary order of warrior monks and the immense fortune they reputedly amassed, the Knights Templar, and the persistent, tantalizing question, what happened to their treasure, and does the Vatican hold the key, or perhaps even the coffers? The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, better known as the Knights Templar, were founded around 1119 AD, in the aftermath of the First Crusade. Their original purpose was to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. Endorsed by the Catholic Church, receiving papal sanction around 1129 at the Council of Troyes, thanks in no small part to the advocacy of Bernard of Clairvaux, they quickly grew in power, wealth, and influence. They established a vast network of fortifications, landholdings, and financial operations across Europe and the Levant. They were, in essence, the first multinational corporation, pioneering early forms of banking, issuing letters of credit, and managing vast sums of money for kings and nobles. You could say they were the medieval equivalent of an armored car service, a bank, and a special forces unit all rolled into one with better headgear. For nearly 2 centuries, the Templars were a formidable force, but their success bred enemies. King Philip IV of France, heavily indebted to the order and covetous of its wealth, launched a ruthless campaign to destroy them. Mainstream historical fact: on Friday, October 13, 1307, a date often anachronistically linked to the origin of Friday the 13th superstition, though the connection is historically tenuous, Philip had Templars throughout France arrested simultaneously. They were charged with a host of shocking offenses, including heresy, idolatry, worshipping a bearded head known as Baphomet, spitting on a cross, and engaging in scandalous initiation rites. Many Templars were brutally tortured into confessing these charges. Pope Clement V, who was heavily under Philip's influence, he had even moved the papacy from Rome to Avignon in France, initially showed some reluctance but eventually buckled under pressure. In 1312, with the papal bull Vox in Excelso, he formally suppressed the Knights Templar. He did not, however, explicitly condemn them as heretical in that bull, but rather dissolved the order due to the scandal and disrepute it had fallen into, stating it was no longer capable of fulfilling its mission. The order's vast properties were largely ordered to be transferred to their rivals, the Knights Hospitaller, though King Philip managed to seize a considerable portion for himself. The last Grand Master of the Templars, Jacques de Molay, after years of imprisonment and a retracted confession, was burned at the stake in Paris in 1314, famously cursing King Philip and Pope Clement from the flames, both of whom, coincidentally or not, died within a year. Probably just a coincidence. A very, very vindictive coincidence. But what about the legendary Templar treasure? Stories abound of a vast hoard of gold, silver, jewels, and perhaps even sacred relics like the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, spirited away before Philip's forces could seize it. Did the Templar fleet, which mysteriously vanished from the port of La Rochelle around the time of the arrests, carry it to safety in Scotland, Portugal, or even North America? This is where the Vatican connection becomes particularly intriguing. Historians still argue about the true extent and nature of the Templar treasure. Was it a literal hoard of gold, or was their treasure more in their extensive landholdings, financial networks, and accumulated knowledge? While much of their physical property was accounted for and transferred, the idea of a lost, hidden cache persists. Some theories suggest that key elements within the Vatican, perhaps sympathetic to the Templars or simply pragmatic, might have played a role in helping to hide or manage some of this wealth, or at least the records pertaining to it. Could documents detailing the Templars' assets, or clues to their hidden troves, still reside within the Vatican Apostolic Archives? Remember those 53 miles of shelves? That's a lot of hiding space. A quirky tidbit that has fueled speculation about a Vatican connection is the discovery of the Chinon parchment in the Vatican Secret Archives in 2001, though it was known to some scholars earlier. This document, dating from 1308, records that Pope Clement V initially absolved the Templar leaders of heresy after they confessed and sought reconciliation with the Church, suggesting he may have believed them to be innocent of the more extreme charges, but was ultimately forced by political pressure from Philip IV to suppress the order. While this doesn't locate any gold, it does show a more nuanced and perhaps less hostile initial papal stance than previously thought, opening the door to theories that the Pope might have tried to protect some aspects of the order, or its assets, from Philip's rapacious grasp. You imagine a clandestine meeting, a worried Templar knight, entrusted with the order's most precious secrets, seeking refuge or guidance from a sympathetic cardinal within the Vatican walls, perhaps arranging for the transfer of sensitive documents or a portion of their wealth to be held in trust, far from King Philip's reach. Or more cynically, perhaps the Vatican itself saw an opportunity to discreetly acquire some of the Templars' legendary riches during the chaos of their dissolution. The Vatican Bank, remember, has a long history of interesting financial management. The allure of lost Templar gold, combined with the Vatican's reputation for secrecy, creates a potent cocktail for conspiracy theorists. While concrete proof of the Vatican holding a hidden Templar treasure remains elusive, the possibility that records within its archives could shed more light on the Templars' final days, their financial dealings, or the true reasons for their suppression is a tantalizing one. The shadows in this vaulted chamber seem to dance, hinting at ancient oaths, hidden maps, and the enduring mystery of a powerful order brought crashing down, its secrets potentially locked away not just by time, but by the very institution that once sanctioned its rise and ultimately decreed its fall. The silence is heavy with the weight of unanswered questions, and perhaps the faint, distant clinking of Templar coins, waiting to be rediscovered. The imagined clinking of Templar gold fades into a hush, replaced by the rustle of ancient parchment and the faint, almost ethereal whisper of prophecy. You find yourself in a quiet scriptorium or perhaps a secluded papal library, the air thick with the scent of aged vellum and contemplative silence of centuries. Your attention is drawn to a series of cryptic Latin phrases, seemingly predicting the destinies of popes yet to come. You are delving into the mystery of the prophecy of the popes, attributed to the 12th century Irish Archbishop, St. Malachy. St. Malachy Milmhaedhoc O'Morgir was a real historical figure, a significant church reformer in Ireland who lived from 1094 to 1148. He made 2 journeys to Rome and was a friend of St. Bernard of Clairvaux. Remember him from the Templar endorsement? Small world in 12th century Christendom. According to legend, during his first visit to Rome around 1139, Malachy experienced a vision in which he saw all the future popes, from Celestine II, elected 1143, until the end of time. He supposedly wrote down a series of 112 short, cryptic Latin phrases, each describing one of these future pontiffs. These prophetic descriptions are often allegorical, based on a pope's family name, birthplace, coat of arms, or a significant event during their pontificate. For example, Pope John Paul II, who was from Krakow, Poland, and whose papacy saw the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, is associated with the phrase de labor solis, of the labor of the sun. Interpretations vary, but one popular one links labor of the sun to an eclipse. He was born on the day of a solar eclipse and buried on the day of one, or to his extensive travels like the sun across the globe, or his work labor in the east, where the sun rises. It's the kind of vague yet specific connection that makes you go, interesting, even if your skeptical eyebrow is doing a little jig. The prophecies were supposedly then deposited in the Roman archives, presumably the Vatican archives precursor, and lay forgotten for over 400 years until they were rediscovered and published in 1595 by a Benedictine historian named Arnold Wyon in his book Lignum Vitae. Mainstream historical fact. The first documented appearance of these prophecies is indeed Wyon's 1595 publication. There is no verifiable mention of them before this date, which is a major point of contention for skeptics. This late appearance is the primary reason many scholars believe the prophecies are a 16th century forgery, likely created around the time of their publication to influence a papal conclave or to lend an air of ancient authority to certain candidates or factions. The prophecies for popes before 1590, those who had already reigned by the time of publication, are often remarkably accurate, fitting their subjects with uncanny precision. However, the descriptions for popes after 1590 become far more vague and open to creative interpretation, which is exactly what you'd expect if someone was writing them retrospectively up to a certain point and then genuinely trying or pretending to predict the future. It's like a psychic who can tell you exactly what you had for breakfast yesterday, but gets a bit fuzzy on next week's lottery numbers. Despite widespread scholarly dismissal as a forgery, the prophecy of the popes has captivated imaginations for centuries, especially as the list nears its end. The 111th pope on Malachi's list is Benedict XVI, described by the phrase Gloria Olivi, the glory of the olive. Interpretations have linked this to the Benedictine order, sometimes called olivetans, or to peace, the olive branch. But it's the 112th and final pope on the list who garners the most attention and anxiety. The prophecy for this last pope is significantly longer and more apocalyptic than the others. In persecution extrema seri sedebit Petrus Romanus, capacitovs in multis tribulationibus, cabus transactus civitas septicalis deruiter, and judex tremendus judicabit populum sum. Finus. This translates to, in the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will sit Peter the Roman, who will feed his flock amid many tribulations. When these things are done, the seven-hilled city will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end. Chilling stuff, right? Peter the Roman. Pope Francis, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, is the current pope. His chosen papal name is Francis, not Peter. He is from Argentina, though his family is of Italian, Roman heritage. Devotees of the prophecy have tried to connect him to Petrus Romanus in various ways. His father's name was Pietro. He is Bishop of Rome. He chose the name Francis in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi, whose full name was Giovanni di Pietro di Bernard I. Historians still argue, or rather, prophecy enthusiasts and skeptics debate, whether the Petrus Romanus prophecy has any validity, or if it's simply the dramatic conclusion to a clever historical hoax. A quirky tidbit is the sheer ingenuity people employ to make the prophecies fit. For example, for a pope whose motto seemed obscure, interpreters might delve into obscure family heraldry, the history of his cardinalate church, or even anagrams of his name until something clicks. It's a masterclass in pattern seeking, whether the pattern is truly there or not. You can imagine the hushed whispers in Vatican corridors, especially during a papal conclave, as cardinals and the wider world glance at Malachi's list. Does it influence them? Probably not consciously for most. But the prophecies add another layer of mystique and, for some, dread to the papal succession. The idea that an ancient Irish saint foresaw the entire lineage of popes, right up to a final apocalyptic pontificate, is a powerful narrative. Whether a genuine vision, a clever forgery, or something in between, the prophecy of the popes remains one of the Vatican's more esoteric and enduring unsolved mysteries. It taps into our fascination with destiny, with hidden knowledge, and with the idea that history might be unfolding according to a preordained plan. The scent of old parchment in your imagined library seems to carry the weight of centuries of expectation, and the cryptic Latin phrases echo with the fates of popes, both past and, perhaps, terrifyingly future. The final ominous words, the end, hang in the air, a chilling reminder of the prophecy's ultimate, unsettling prediction for the city of. The faint, prophetic whispers of Malachi's predictions recede, and a more immediate, palpable sense of unease fills the air. You are no longer in a library of ancient prophecies, but in the modern corridors of the Apostolic Palace in the late summer of 1978. The atmosphere is heavy, not with dust or incense, but with a disquieting mixture of shock and suspicion. Your focus is drawn to the figure of Pope John Paul I, Albino Luciani, the smiling pope, whose papacy lasted a mere 33 days. His sudden, unexpected death is a Vatican mystery that continues to fuel speculation and dark theories. Albino Luciani was elected pope on August 26, 1978, taking the name John Paul I in a tribute to his two immediate predecessors, John XI and Paul VI. He was known for his humility, his warmth, and his pastoral approach. He charmed the world with his gentle smile and his desire for a simpler, less monarchical papacy. He eschewed the traditional papal coronation with a tiara, opting instead for a more modest investiture in Massachusetts. He seemed poised to bring a fresh, compassionate spirit to the leadership of the Catholic Church. You can almost feel the hope and optimism that surrounded his election. He was a breath of fresh air, a pope who spoke of God as our mother as well as our father. Then, on the morning of September 28, 1978, after just 33 days as pontiff, Pope John Paul I was found dead in his bed by Sister Vincenza Taffarel, one of the nuns who managed the papal household. The official Vatican announcement stated that he had died of a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, sometime the previous night. He was 65 years old. The swiftness of his death, combined with his relatively good health prior to his election, though he had experienced some health issues in the past, immediately sparked disbelief and suspicion. The Vatican's handling of the aftermath did little to quell these suspicions. Initial reports were contradictory and, some felt, misleading. For instance, the Vatican initially claimed he was found by one of his secretaries, not Sister Vincenza, perhaps because it was considered unseemly for a nun to have entered the Pope's bedroom. No autopsy was performed, which is highly unusual, especially for the sudden death of a head of state. The Vatican stated that an autopsy was not customary for popes and that the family had not requested one. This lack of a formal postmortem examination became a major point of contention and a breeding ground for conspiracy theories. It's like saying, "Nothing to see here, folks, just a perfectly normal, completely unexpected death of a global religious leader. No need for pesky medical details." Mainstream historical fact: Pope John Paul I's brief pontificate and sudden death are well documented, but the precise circumstances and the Vatican's initial reticence have led to enduring questions. Many books and articles have been written exploring the possibility that he was murdered. The most prominent theory, popularized by David Yallop's 1984 book In God's Name, alleged that John Paul I was poisoned because he was planning to root out corruption within the Vatican Bank, remember those murky millions, and to remove powerful figures, including Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, who were allegedly connected to financial scandals and even Masonic lodges. According to this theory, John Paul I had discovered wrongdoing and was about to take decisive action when he was silenced. The motive was clear: protect entrenched financial and political interests within the Vatican. Historians still argue vehemently about the likelihood of John Paul I's murder. Skeptics of the assassination theories point to his known, albeit not severe, history of health problems, the stress of his new office, and the lack of concrete evidence of foul play. They argue that the inconsistencies in the Vatican's initial statements were due to incompetence or a desire to manage public perception, rather than a cover-up of murder. Proponents of the murder theory, however, point to the powerful enemies he might have made with his reformist agenda, the suspicious lack of an autopsy, and testimonies from individuals who claimed he was in good spirits and health just hours before his death. A quirky and rather poignant tidbit is that John Paul I himself, in one of his first addresses, spoke of the immense responsibility he felt and asked for prayers, almost as if he had a premonition of the challenges or dangers ahead. Some also point to the notes he was reportedly reviewing on the night of his death, which supposedly detailed planned personnel changes and investigations. Were these notes a death warrant? You try to piece together the scene: the quiet papal apartments, the unsuspecting pope retiring for the night, perhaps with a sense of purpose and determination for the reforms he planned. And then silence. Was it a natural, albeit tragic, end? Or was there a more sinister hand at play, a shadowy figure slipping a tasteless poison into his evening medication or drink? The Vatican, as a sovereign city-state, controls its own internal investigations, its own narrative. The lack of transparency in this case has allowed the darkest suspicions to fester for decades. The figure of the smiling pope, frozen in time by his untimely death, becomes a symbol of hope abruptly extinguished, of reforms potentially thwarted. His 33-day reign is a tantalizing what-if in papal history. What kind of pope would he have become had he lived? Would he have indeed cleaned house at the Vatican Bank? Would he have steered the church in a different direction? The terrifying secret here is the gnawing uncertainty, the possibility that the highest office in the Catholic Church could be subject to such brutal, worldly machinations. Whether by natural causes or by nefarious means, the death of John Paul I left an indelible mark of suspicion and sorrow, a question mark hanging heavy in the Vatican air, a reminder that even a pope's life might not be sacred if powerful interests feel threatened. The corridors of the apostolic palace suddenly feel much colder, haunted by the ghost of a gentle pope who may have smiled too soon, or perhaps smiled at the wrong people. The somber air of Pope John Paul I's apartments lightens, but the chill remains, now emanating from deep beneath your feet. You are descending once more further down. Then the Mithraeum, into the very bedrock of Vatican Hill. The atmosphere is one of profound antiquity, the scent of damp earth, ancient stone, and the almost palpable presence of millennia. You are in the Vatican necropolis, the city of the dead, that lies directly beneath St. Peter's Basilica. And here, amidst a labyrinth of pagan and early Christian tombs, lies one of the Vatican's most foundational and fiercely debated secrets, the contested tomb and bones of St. Peter himself. The belief that St. Peter, the apostle, the rock upon which Jesus declared he would build his church, was martyred and buried in Rome on Vatican Hill is a cornerstone of Catholic tradition and the basis for the primacy of the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. For centuries, pilgrims have flocked to St. Peter's Basilica, believing they were in the presence of the apostle's final resting place. The main altar of the current basilica, the papal altar, is positioned directly over the traditional side of his tomb. It's the ultimate holy ground for Catholics. However, for much of history, the exact location and nature of Peter's tomb were matters of faith and tradition rather than archaeological certainty. Then, in the 1940s, during the pontificate of Pope Pius XII, secret excavations were authorized beneath the basilica's crypt. These excavations were initially intended to prepare a burial place for Pius XI, but soon evolved into a systematic archaeological investigation of the area beneath the high altar. What the excavators, led by Monsignor Ludwig Koss and archaeologists Enrico Yossi, Antonio Ferreira, and Engelbert Kirschbaum, discovered was astounding: a vast, remarkably well-preserved Roman necropolis, a street lined with mausoleums dating from the 1st to the 4th centuries AD. It was like peeling back layers of time. Within this necropolis, directly beneath the papal altar, they found a small, simple shrine-like structure, known as the edicula, dating to around 160 AD, built against a red-plastered wall, the Red Wall. This edicula was clearly a focal point of veneration, surrounded by later burials, all oriented towards it. Beneath the edicula, they found an even earlier, simple earth grave. This, the excavators in the Vatican came to believe, was a Tropaean trophy or monument mentioned by the Roman presbyter Gaius around 200 AD as marking the site of Peter's martyrdom on Vatican Hill. Mainstream historical fact: in his 1950 Christmas radio broadcast, Pope Pius XII announced that the tomb of St. Peter had, in his judgment, been found. But the bones were another matter. Within a niche in the Red Wall, associated with the edicula, a cache of human bones was discovered. These bones were removed, reportedly by a Vatican workman, Monsignor Koss, without the immediate knowledge of the other archaeologists, and stored in a box for nearly a decade. When they were finally rediscovered and examined in the 1960s, physical anthropologist Venerando Correnti concluded they belonged to a single individual, a robustly built male, aged between 60 and 70, consistent with the traditional age and physique of St. Peter. Furthermore, fragments of costly purple cloth interwoven with gold thread were found with the bones, suggesting the remains had been wrapped in a precious textile, indicative of high honor. In 1968, Pope Paul VI announced that the relics of St. Peter had been identified in a way which we can hold to be convincing. However, the identification remains a subject of scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the bones found are definitively those of St. Peter. Critics point to the complex stratigraphy of the site, the disturbed nature of some of the finds, and the chain of custody issues with the bones themselves. Was the initial removal and storage of the bones handled with sufficient scientific rigor? Could the bones be from another revered Christian buried near the edicula, or even a later interment? The presence of other bones from different individuals found in the same vicinity complicates the picture. It's like a very, very old cold case with tantalizing clues but no definitive DNA match. Though some limited forensic testing has been done, its interpretation is also debated. A quirky tidbit is that among the graffiti found on a wall near the edicula, the graffiti wall, there are inscriptions that have been interpreted as invocations to Peter. One inscription, Petros Eni in Greek, has been controversially translated by some as Peter is within or Peter is here. For believers, this is compelling evidence. For skeptics, the interpretation is strained, and the graffiti could refer to other individuals named Peter or have different meanings entirely. Imagine the thrill of finding what you believe is a second-century message confirming the apostles' presence. You find yourself standing in the cool subterranean air, surrounded by the tombs of Roman citizens, both pagan and Christian. The weight of centuries presses down. The discovery of the necropolis itself is an incredible archaeological achievement, offering a unique window into Roman burial practices and the early Christian community in Rome. But the specific identification of St. Peter's tomb and bones carries an immense theological and institutional weight for the Catholic Church. It validates Rome's claim as the Apostolic See. The Vatican presents the evidence with confidence, and millions of faithful accept it. Yet, the lingering questions, the scholarly debates, the very fact that an element of faith is still required to bridge the gaps in the archaeological record, make it an enduring secret in the sense of a truth not universally or unequivocally proven by purely scientific means. The bones beneath St. Peter's represent a profound intersection of faith, history, and science. Whether they are truly the mortal remains of the fishermen from Galilee or not, their presence, or believed presence, underpins the authority of an institution that has shaped Western civilization. The thought that the very foundation of this global institution rests, quite literally, on a collection of bones whose identity remains a subject of academic discussion is a powerful and, for some, unsettling realization. The earth beneath your feet feels both sacred and deeply mysterious, holding its secrets close. The deep chill of St. Peter's necropolis gradually warms as you ascend, metaphorically speaking, into the sun-drenched splendor of the Vatican's palaces and chapels, places like the Sistine Chapel or the Raphael rooms. The air is no longer heavy with the scent of earth or decay, but with a faint, almost imperceptible aroma of aged pigments, old wood, and perhaps a hint of beeswax polish. Your gaze is drawn to the breathtaking masterpieces of Renaissance art that adorn every surface. But as you look closer, beyond the obvious beauty and devotional subject matter, you begin to notice subtle details, unusual symbols, and compositional choices that hint at a deeper, perhaps even subversive layer of meaning. You are now decoding the potential hidden heresies and esoteric messages veiled within the Vatican's own celebrated art. The Vatican is home to one of the world's most extraordinary collections of art, commissioned by popes who are often powerful patrons, deeply invested in using art to project their authority, piety, and theological messages. Artists like Michelangelo, Raphael, Botticelli, and Bernini created works that are iconic expressions of Catholic faith and doctrine. That's the surface story, the one presented in art history textbooks, and to the millions of tourists who flock to Vatican City each year. However, the Renaissance was also a period of intense intellectual ferment, a rediscovery of classical learning, including Neoplatonic philosophy, Hermeticism, and even elements of Kabbalah. Many artists and scholars of the era were deeply immersed in these esoteric traditions, which sometimes sat uncomfortably alongside Orthodox Christian belief. Could some of these artists, even while working for the highest echelons of the church, have subtly encoded their own, less conventional, or even heretical ideas into their works? It's like a divine Easter egg hunt, where the prizes are hidden symbols and challenging ideas. Consider Michelangelo's masterpiece, The Ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Mainstream historical fact. The overarching theme is the story of Genesis, from the creation to the fall of man to the story of Noah. It's a monumental depiction of biblical narrative. However, some art historians and theorists have proposed more controversial interpretations. For instance, in the panel The Creation of Adam, the depiction of God the Father surrounded by a billowing cloak and angelic figures has been noted by some, like physician Frank Lynn Meshberger, to bear a striking resemblance to a sagittal view of the human brain. Is Michelangelo subtly suggesting that God is giving Adam not just life, but intellect, or that the divine is found within human consciousness? Or is it just a coincidental pareidolia, seeing patterns where none were intended? Then there's the figure of God himself. In some panels, he appears almost Zeus-like, a powerful, muscular patriarch, perhaps drawing more from classical pagan imagery than traditional Christian iconography. Some have even speculated that Michelangelo, known for his sometimes stormy relationship with his patrons, including Pope Julius II, might have embedded subtle critiques or personal statements within his work. Imagine Julius II looking up and saying, "Is it just me, or does that cherub look suspiciously like my annoying nephew?" Historians still argue, and art historians passionately debate, the extent to which Renaissance artists deliberately embedded esoteric or subversive meanings into their Vatican commissions. Were they simply using the artistic and intellectual vocabulary of their time, which included Neoplatonism and classical allusions, or were they consciously trying to communicate hidden truths to a select, initiated audience, right under the noses of their papal patrons? Proving intent is notoriously difficult centuries later. A quirky tidbit often cited by those looking for hidden messages is the use of specific hand gestures, an interest in sacred geometry, or the inclusion of figures or symbols that seem to have dual meanings, one exoteric for the general public and one esoteric for those in the know. For example, some point to Raphael's School of Athens in the Stans della Signatura, which depicts Plato pointing upwards to the realm of ideal forms and Aristotle pointing downwards to the empirical world. While this is a standard philosophical interpretation, some see deeper Hermetic or Neoplatonic meanings encoded in the gathering of classical philosophers, all within a papal apartment. The Vatican itself is, of course, unlikely to officially acknowledge or promote interpretations that suggest its most prized artworks contain heretical or non-Christian ideas. The official narrative emphasizes their role in illustrating Catholic doctrine and inspiring devotion. Yet, the very richness and complexity of these works allow for multiple layers of interpretation. The artists were geniuses, not just skilled craftsmen, and they were operating in an environment where symbolic language was potent and widely understood, at least among the educated elite. You gaze at a fresco, a sculpture, a tapestry. The figures seem to almost shift and whisper, their painted smiles or sorrowful eyes holding secrets just beyond your grasp. What if the true Da Vinci Code isn't in Leonardo's work, but scattered throughout the Vatican's own collection, a silent testament to a more complex, syncretic, and perhaps even rebellious intellectual undercurrent flowing beneath the surface of official dogma? The terrifying secret here isn't a monstrous demon or a hidden treasure, but the subtle, intellectual challenge to orthodoxy that might be staring back at you from the eyes of a painted saint or the muscular form of a biblical hero. It's the possibility that the Vatican, in its desire to harness the greatest artistic talents of its age, inadvertently allowed for the creation of works that could be read as questioning, or at least complicating, the very truths it sought to proclaim. The beauty is undeniable, but the messages within that beauty might be far more unsettling and far more secretive than most visitors ever realize. The art itself becomes a kind of archive, holding dialogues between faith and reason, orthodoxy and heresy, in a language of color, form, and symbol that continues to mystify and provoke. The journey through these 76, well tonight, a representative 16, shadowy corridors of Vatican secrets, real and rumored, begins to draw to a close. The air, once thick with the scent of ancient parchment, cold stone, old money, and even the faint hint of brimstone or starlight, now seems to settle. The vivid images of exhumed popes, vanishing schoolgirls, contested bones, and cryptic prophecies begin to soften around the edges, like watercolors left in a gentle rain. You feel the pace of your thoughts slowing, the urgency of the mysteries giving way to a more contemplative quiet. These stories, whether unsettling historical facts, persistent legends, or outright conspiracy theories, all speak to the immense gravitational pull of the Vatican as a center of power, faith, and secrecy that has spanned 2 millennia. It's an institution that has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, navigated treacherous political waters, and guided the spiritual lives of billions, all while accumulating a repository of knowledge, wealth, and influence that naturally breeds speculation and a sense of the unknown lurking just beneath its hallowed surfaces. The shadows you've journeyed through tonight are, perhaps, not just external to us, but also reflections of our own human fascination with the hidden, our desire to understand the forces that shape our world, and our innate suspicion of concentrated power. The Vatican, with its ancient walls and guarded archives, becomes a canvas upon which these anxieties and curiosities are painted in vivid, sometimes terrifying hues. But now, let the echoes of these unsolved mysteries fade. Let the disquiet they may have stirred gently subside. The soft background hum you might have, that fan whirring, or the quiet night outside your window, can now become a comforting sound, grounding you back in your own peaceful space. The most profound secrets, perhaps, are not those locked away in vaults, but those that reside within the human heart, and those are for another time. For tonight, allow your mind to release these tangled tales. Feel the weight of your eyelids, the gentle pull of approaching slumber. Whatever truths or deceptions lie hidden within those ancient Roman walls, they can wait. Your rest cannot. Sweet dreams. This is the end of tonight's development session on the Darkness Prevails channel. Thank you all for watching, and good night, everyone. We will see you again tomorrow with more interesting stories.